Marcus Chen is smiling. He's sitting in courtroom 4B right now, arms crossed, watching his ex-wife across the aisle. She's alone, completely alone. No attorney, no evidence, just a manila folder so thin it's practically see-through. Her hands are shaking. Marcus notices, and his smile gets wider. In his mind, this is already over. The judge will rule in 10 minutes. He keeps his $340 million empire. She gets $3 million, barely enough to matter, and disappears from his life forever. But Marcus has made 3 catastrophic mistakes. And he has no idea. The first mistake happened 2 hours ago on the witness stand. He said 6 words under oath. 6 words he thought were safe. 6 words that are about to destroy him. I'll tell you what those 6 words were in a minute. But first, you need to understand the second mistake. The second mistake happened 7 months ago. When Marcus froze all the bank accounts and filed for divorce, he assumed his wife would just give up. She had no money, no connections, no way to fight back. What he didn't know is that Alina had a phone number. A number she'd kept in an old address book for 17 years. A number she never thought she'd need to use. She used it. The person who answered, well, that's coming. But here's what matters. That phone call set something in motion. Something that's been building for 6 months. Investigators in 4 countries, forensic accountants, 200 hours of digging through records Marcus thought were buried forever. And 4 minutes from now, the results of that work are going to walk through the courtroom doors. But the third mistake, that's the one that's going to haunt him. See, Marcus has a habit. When he looks at people, he decides in about 3 seconds whether they matter, whether they're worth his attention, whether they're players or furniture. 17 years ago, he looked at Alina and decided she was furniture, decorative, harmless, forgettable. He was wrong. But he won't understand how wrong until he learns what Alina did before she met him, something she never told him about, something that happened on a rainy highway, something that created a debt. And the person who owes that debt. She's in the parking garage right now, reviewing documents, checking her watch, waiting for the perfect moment to walk in and end Marcus's world. Here's what I can tell you. In 3 minutes, the courtroom doors are going to explode open. In 4 minutes, Marcus's attorney, a man who's won 100 divorces just like this, is going to go completely pale and forget how to speak. In 6 minutes, Marcus is going to hear a name, just a name, 2 words, and those 2 words are going to make his stomach drop because he'll finally understand what's happening. Here's what I can't tell you yet. What those 6 words were that he said under oath. Who's about to walk through those doors. What Alina did 17 years ago that changed everything. Or how much money Marcus is about to lose. But I can tell you this. By the end of today, Marcus Chen will realize that the biggest mistake of his life wasn't hiding money, wasn't lying to the court, wasn't even the divorce itself. It was underestimating a woman he thought didn't matter. And you're about to watch it happen in real time. This is the most devastating courtroom reversal I've ever covered. Every time I thought I knew where it was going, it went somewhere worse. For Marcus, anyway. What Marcus didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that the case had already been decided. Not by money, not by power, but by something that happened 17 years earlier. Now let me take you back to this morning. 8:47 a.m. when Marcus walked into that courtroom, absolutely certain he'd already won. October 14th, 8:47 a.m. Marcus Chen doesn't walk into courtrooms. He arrives. He makes an entrance. 6'1", broad-shouldered from a personal trainer he pays $200 an hour. Tom Ford suit in midnight blue that cost $12,000 and fit him like armor. Italian leather shoes, Santoni, polished to mirror shine. Silver hair swept back in a style that said distinguished without saying old. tan from his weekend place in Cabo San Lucas, a Patek Philippe on his wrist worth more than most people's houses. He looked like success, smelled like it, carried himself with the casual confidence of a man who'd built an empire from nothing and knew he deserved every penny. Behind him walked 3 attorneys from Foster & Klein, the city's most brutal and effective divorce firm. They didn't come cheap. Derek Foster's hourly rate was $850, but they delivered results. Derek Foster led the pack. 56 years old, sharp-featured, steel-gray hair, and the eyes of a shark. He'd been practicing family law for 30 years. His track record spoke for itself. Wealthy clients walked away with their fortunes intact while ex-spouses settled for pennies on the dollar. Behind Derek came 2 younger associates whose job was to carry files and learn from the master. Marcus took his seat at the defense table, the heavy wooden chair creaking under his weight. He allowed himself one long, appraising look at the woman across the aisle. Elena, his wife of 16 years, ex-wife technically. The papers had been filed 6 months ago. She was 41 but looked older that morning. The stress had aged her. Her dark hair, once lustrous, was pulled back in a simple bun that looked self-done. No professional styling, no product, just practical efficiency. She wore a navy dress that Marcus recognized as department store quality, off the rack, probably less than $200. No jewelry except her wedding ring, which she still wore for some inexplicable reason. And that's when Marcus did something that would come back to haunt him. He leaned over to Derek and whispered, just loud enough for the court reporter's microphone to pick up, "Look at her. She still thinks she matters." Derek smirked, not for much longer. Marcus had no idea that whisper was being recorded, no idea it would end up as evidence, no idea that 6 hours from now, a judge would play it back and her expression would turn to ice. But that comes later. Her hands were folded in her lap, fingers interlaced, knuckles white from pressure. She sat with perfect posture, but there was fragility to it, like she was holding herself together through pure force of will. And she sat completely alone. No attorney beside her, no legal representation, no family in the gallery, no friends offering support. Just Elena and a manila folder on the table that looked pathetically thin, maybe 20 pages inside. Against Marcus's 3 attorneys, and their briefcases full of documentation. It would be a massacre. Marcus almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The pity died quickly, replaced by familiar irritation. She'd had 16 years to make something of herself. 16 years to build a career, develop skills, contribute something beyond managing a household already run by paid staff. And what had she done? Nothing. She'd been content to coast on his success. Well, those days were over. Derek leaned close. Remember, controlled confidence. Answer directly but don't volunteer information. Let me handle the theatrics. Marcus smiled, thin and cold. Derek, I've been performing my whole life. Built my first company on performance. Convinced investors to give me money when I had nothing but a pitch and a dream. This is just another negotiation, another stage, and I always close my deals. Derek nodded, satisfied. 8:52 a.m. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison. The courtroom stood as one. Marcus remained seated a beat longer than necessary, a small power play, before rising with deliberate slowness. Judge Morrison entered. 60 years old, sharp-featured, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She'd been on the bench for 25 years with a reputation for 2 things: fairness that bordered on severity and zero patience for bullshit. She settled into her chair and opened the case file. "Be seated." Everyone sat. Judge Morrison scanned the file briefly. "We're here for Chen versus Chen. Dissolution of marriage, division of assets, spousal support. She looked at the defense table. "Mr. Foster, you're representing the respondent." Derek stood smoothly, movements practiced. "Yes, Your Honor. Derek Foster of Foster and Klein, appearing on behalf of Marcus Chen." "And Mrs. Chen, are you representing yourself pro se?" Elena stood slowly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes, Your Honor." "I'm sorry, you'll need to speak up. The court reporter can't hear you." Elena cleared her throat, straightened her shoulders. "Yes, Your Honor, I'm representing myself." Louder now, but still fragile, still small. The voice of someone who'd learned to be quiet. To take up less space, to ask for less. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. 25 years on the bench meant she'd seen this scenario play out hundreds of times. The wealthy spouse with the legal armada. The abandoned spouse with nothing but a marriage certificate and whatever scraps they could gather. The outcomes were depressingly predictable. "Very well," Judge Morrison said. "Mr. Foster, your opening statement." Derek rose with the fluid confidence of a man who'd done this 1,000 times and won 900 of them. He buttoned his suit jacket and approached the podium. "Your Honor, thank you. This is, as you noted, a straightforward case of dissolution. My client, Mr. Marcus Chen, is a successful businessman who built his real estate empire from absolutely nothing. 20 years ago, he started with a single commercial property, a small office building he renovated and leased in the warehouse district. It was a significant risk. He leveraged everything he had, took out loans he wasn't sure he could repay. But he believed in his vision, and he was willing to do the work. Over the next 2 decades, he expanded strategically. Today, Chen Holdings owns and operates 43 commercial properties across 8 states, office buildings, retail centers, mixed-use developments. The portfolio is independently valued at approximately $340 million. They generate approximately $32 million in annual revenue. They employ over 500 people directly, and many more through contractors and service providers. My client is, by any reasonable measure, a significant contributor to this community's economic vitality." Derek paused, letting that sink in, letting the judge absorb the magnitude of Marcus's achievement. Mrs. Elena Chen, by contrast, has been a homemaker for the duration of this 16-year marriage. She has no employment history beyond a brief period, less than 2 years, working as a nurse's assistant before the marriage began. She has no independent income, no assets in her own name, no professional credentials, no marketable skills. She has for nearly 2 decades been wholly and completely dependent on my client's generosity and provision. Marcus watched Elena as Derek spoke. She didn't flinch, didn't react, just sat there, hands folded, staring at the table. Derek continued, his voice taking on magnanimous reasonableness. "Now, Your Honor, my client is not without compassion. He recognizes that Mrs. Chen made certain contributions to the marriage in her capacity as a homemaker, though that contribution was, how shall I put this delicately, limited in scope. There were no children from this marriage, no complex household to manage. My client maintained a full-time household staff, a chef, a housekeeper, a property manager, groundskeepers. Mrs. Chen's role was largely ceremonial." A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. "Therefore," Derek said, moving toward his conclusion, "my client proposes what he believes to be a generous and fair settlement, $3 million, paid in a lump sum within 30 days of final judgment. No ongoing spousal support beyond that single payment. Mrs. Chen can use that sum to establish herself independently, to pursue education or training if she wishes, to begin building a life separate from my client's considerable resources." He returned to his seat, confident and satisfied. $3 million. To the uninformed, it sounded like an almost unfathomable amount, life-changing. But in the context of an estate worth $340 million, $3 million was less than 1%, an insult, a rounding error. Judge Morrison turned to Alina. Mrs. Chen, do you wish to make an opening statement? Alina stood again, slower this time, like her legs didn't quite want to support her. Your Honor, she paused, gathered herself. I believe the division of assets should reflect the law as written. California is a community property state. All assets acquired during the marriage should be divided equitably. I'm not seeking anything unreasonable. I'm just asking for what's fair under the law. Her voice cracked on the last word, fair. Marcus leaned toward Derek. This is going to be even easier than I thought. Derek's smile was predatory. They always think fairness matters. Judge Morrison made a note. Very well, Mr. Foster, you may call your first witness. The respondent calls Marcus Chen to the stand, Your Honor. The morning unfolded like an execution. Marcus stood, buttoned his jacket with practiced ease, and walked to the witness box. He moved with the casual confidence of a man who owned every room he entered, who'd built boardrooms and courtrooms into theaters where he performed and audiences watched. He was sworn in, I do, clear and confident, and sat down, folding his hands in his lap. A mirror of Alina's posture, but where hers showed anxiety, his projected control. Derek approached. Mr. Chen, please tell the court about your professional background. Start from the beginning. Of course. Marcus's voice was deep, resonant, perfectly modulated, the voice of a man accustomed to being listened to. I founded Chen Holdings 22 years ago with a single commercial property, a small office building I purchased and renovated in the warehouse district. It was a significant risk. I'd leveraged everything I had, taken out loans I wasn't entirely sure I could repay. But I believed in my vision, and I was willing to do the work necessary to see it through. He paused for dramatic effect. Over the next 2 decades, I expanded strategically. Today, Chen Holdings owns and operates 43 commercial properties across 8 states, office buildings, retail centers, mixed-use developments. Our portfolio is independently valued at approximately $340 million, and we generate approximately $32 million in annual revenue. We employ over 500 people directly, and many more indirectly. Impressive, Derek said, and you built this empire entirely through your own efforts. I did. I worked 16-hour days for years, Your Honor, 18-hour days sometimes. I took risks that would have destroyed me if they'd failed. I made sacrifices, personal sacrifices, social sacrifices. Every decision, every negotiation, every acquisition, that was me, my judgment, my work, my vision. And during this time, Mr. Chen, what was your wife's role in building Chen Holdings? Marcus glanced at Alina. She was staring at the table, face carefully neutral. Alina's role was supportive at the beginning, I suppose. She attended some social functions in the early years of our marriage, hosted a few dinners for clients and investors, made small talk at charity events. But as the company grew and the demands on my time increased, she withdrew from even those limited responsibilities. She preferred to stay home, preferred not to engage with the business or the social obligations that came with building a company of this magnitude. Did she contribute financially to the business? Did she invest capital or provide loans? No, she had no income, no savings, no investments of her own. Everything, the house we lived in, the food we ate, the clothes she wore, the car she drove, all of it came from my earnings. Did she assist with business operations in any capacity? Bookkeeping, management, client relations? No. Did she pursue education or training during the marriage? No. So to be clear, during 16 years of marriage, while you were building a $340 million empire, Mrs. Chen contributed no financial resources, no labor, no expertise. That's correct. Derek nodded slowly. And have you disclosed all your assets to this court, Mr. Chen? Every account, every property, every investment. This was it, the moment, the 6 words. Marcus looked directly at the judge and said, yes, every single asset, I swear. He had no idea that those 6 words, every single asset, I swear, would be played back to him 4 hours from now, when a woman he'd never heard of would present evidence of 9 offshore accounts he just lied about under oath. Perjury carries 5 years in federal prison. But Marcus doesn't know that yet. Right now, he thinks he's winning. Derek nodded slowly, letting each answer settle into the record. Mr. Chen, in your professional opinion, what would constitute a fair and reasonable settlement for Mrs. Chen? I believe $3 million is more than generous, Your Honor. It's enough to provide her with financial security for many years, enough to give her opportunities most people never have. I believe it reflects my genuine appreciation for the years we spent together while also acknowledging the fundamental reality. I built this empire alone. Marcus didn't notice the bailiff glance at Alina. Or the way Judge Morrison paused her pen for half a second longer than necessary. Small things. The kind of things that never mattered to him until they did. Derek returned to his seat. Thank you, Mr. Chen. Your witness, Mrs. Chen. Alina stood slowly. She picked up a single sheet of paper from her folder, handwritten notes in shaky script, questions she'd prepared in lonely weeks leading up to this hearing. She approached the witness box like someone walking toward the edge of a cliff. Marcus, she said quietly. Her voice trembled slightly. Yes, he looked at her with mild inconvenience. Do you remember when we got married? He blinked, frowned. That's not a relevant legal question, Alina. Do you remember what you said to me at the altar? Judge Morrison leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Chen, please try to keep your questions relevant to asset division. I'm sorry, Your Honor, Alina looked back at Marcus. You said we were partners. You said everything we built would be ours together, that we'd build our life side by side. Do you remember that? Marcus's expression didn't change. Cold, professional. Alina, people say a lot of things at weddings. It's emotional, romantic, but words don't build companies. Work builds companies, actual labor, and I was the one who worked. I worked too, Alina said, and for the first time there was heat in her voice. Steel. Maybe not in an office, but I worked. I was there. Being there isn't work, Alina. His tone sharpened like a blade. Being there is just proximity. You were present in my life, yes, but you contributed nothing of substance. You managed a household that was already being managed by staff I paid for. You attended parties you didn't want to be at. You had every comfort, every luxury, and you gave nothing in return. Someone in the gallery gasped softly. Alina's face flushed, but she pressed on. Your Honor, I know there are assets he hasn't disclosed, accounts that exist but aren't in these filings. Properties held under different names through different structures. I don't have documentation, but I know. Mrs. Chen, Judge Morrison said firmly, do you have actual evidence of undisclosed assets, documents, bank statements? I know they exist, Your Honor, but I don't have access to the records. Marcus controlled everything, all the accounts, all the paperwork. Then I cannot consider allegations without evidence. If you have no documentation, I must proceed based on the disclosures properly submitted. Do you have any documented proof? Alina's shoulders sagged. The fight went out of her. No, Your Honor, I don't. Then we'll proceed based on the disclosures already in evidence. Mr. Chen, you may step down. Marcus returned to his seat, victorious. Derek clapped him on the shoulder approvingly. Derek called their accountant next. Gerald Park presented spreadsheets, tax returns, property deeds. Everything showed exactly what Marcus wanted. Company worth $340 million, personal assets of $18 million, nothing hidden. Alina tried to cross-examine, but her questions were scattered, uncertain. She didn't understand corporate structures, couldn't challenge the numbers. By 11:45 a.m. it was over. Judge Morrison called lunch. We resume at 1:30. Marcus and his team went to a steakhouse. $40 steaks, victory toasts. Alina stayed in the courtroom, didn't move, just sat there, hands folded, staring at nothing. A bailiff asked if she needed anything. She shook her head. She sat alone in the empty courtroom, a ghost haunting her own life. Now, before we get to the moment everything explodes, and trust me, it's coming, I need to know, have you ever been underestimated by someone who lived to regret it? Drop a comment, tell me your story. Because what happens next is the most devastating reversal I've ever covered. 1:28 p.m. The courtroom began to refill slowly. Marcus returned first. Arriving at 1:25 p.m., the scent of expensive scotch was still faint on his breath. He was relaxed now, loose, confident. The ribeye and the martinis and the congratulations from his legal team had left him feeling magnanimous. Maybe he'd even be gracious when the judge ruled in his favor. Maybe he'd shake Alina's hand, wish her well, suggest she use the $3 million wisely. Derek and the two associates followed, carrying additional files. More documentation, more ammunition, more proof, as if more were needed, of Alina's insignificance. The gallery was fuller than it had been that morning. Word had spread somehow, the way word always spreads in courthouses. Curious attorneys on lunch break wandered in. Law students looking for real-world education. A few journalists who covered family court, hopping for something interesting to write about. Alina was already seated. Of course she was, she'd never left. Same navy dress, more wrinkled now from hours of sitting. Same manila folder, looking even thinner, like she'd exhausted what little it had contained. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing, a ghost haunting the ruins of her own life. 1:29 p.m. Judge Morrison entered. Be seated. Mr. Foster, do you have additional witnesses? Derek stood, confidence radiating from every gesture. Yes, Your Honor, the respondent calls. And that's when Marcus's phone vibrated in his pocket. He shouldn't have looked at it. Phones are supposed to be silenced in court, but something made him glance down at the screen. It was a text from his offshore accountant in the Cayman Islands. Just 2 words. Call ME. All caps, urgent. Marcus felt the first flutter of unease in his stomach. His accountant never texted during business hours, never used all caps. Something was wrong. He started to reach for his phone to step outside when the doors exploded open. Both of them swinging wide with a crack like a gunshot. Every head turned in perfect synchronization. Every whispered conversation died mid-sentence. Even the court reporter's fingers froze above her stenotype keys. The woman who entered wasn't tall, maybe 5'8" in her heels, but she commanded the room anyway. She owned it with a presence that had nothing to do with physical stature and everything to do with power. Mid-50s, black, with silver-white hair cut close to her scalp like a warrior's helmet. The kind of cut that said she had no time for vanity, no interest in softening her edges for anyone's comfort. Charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it had been sewn directly onto her body. Burgundy leather briefcase in her left hand. But it wasn't her appearance that changed everything in that courtroom. It was the way Marcus Chen's attorney went pale. Derek Foster had been mid-sentence, his hand gesturing confidently toward the defense table. Now his mouth hung open like a fish drowning in air. His hand dropped to his side as if the strings holding it up had been cut. His face had gone from ruddy confidence to the pallor of someone who'd just seen a ghost. Not just any ghost, the ghost. Because the woman walking down that center aisle, heels clicking against marble like a countdown timer, was Diana Monroe. Someone in the gallery actually gasped, a sharp intake of breath that carried in the sudden silence. One of the law students in the back row shot to his feet, eyes wide with something between excitement and disbelief, then sat back down hard. A paralegal from Foster and Klein turned to her colleague and mouthed 2 words, "We're fucked." And Marcus Chen felt something he hadn't experienced in 20 years, fear, Pure, undiluted, ice in his veins fear. Diana reached the gate separating the gallery from the court floor. She didn't pause, didn't ask permission. She simply pushed through with casual authority. She walked directly to the plaintiff's table, where Alina sat alone. Diana set her briefcase down, with a solid thunk that sounded like a judge's gavel. Then she turned to face the court. And she smiled, not warm, not friendly, a predator's smile. "Forgive my tardiness, Your Honor," she said, and her voice carried through the silent courtroom like a bell. Traffic from the airport was unconscionable. Judge Patricia Morrison had removed her reading glasses. She held them suspended midair, frozen in an expression that might have been shock if judges allowed themselves such things. She'd been on the bench for 25 years. She'd seen everything: explosive revelations, courtroom meltdowns, shocking confessions. But Diana Monroe entering a case mid-trial, this was unprecedented. "Counselor," Judge Morrison said slowly, carefully, "am I to understand you're entering an appearance in this matter?" "Yes, Your Honor." Diana's smile widened fractionally. "Diana Monroe, appearing as counsel for the petitioner, Alina Chen. I apologize for not filing notice earlier. But the circumstances were unusual, and time was of the essence." Diana Monroe. The name moved through the courtroom like a shockwave, rippling out from the court floor to the gallery in expanding circles of recognition and disbelief. And Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. He knew that name. Everyone in business knew that name. 3 years ago, Diana Monroe had destroyed a tech CEO in a shareholder lawsuit, took him from billionaire to bankrupt in 8 months. The man ended up in federal prison. 2 years ago, she defended a pharmaceutical company against the DOJ. 1. Made the federal prosecutors look like amateurs. Last year, she'd handled a hostile takeover defense for a Fortune 100 company. The attackers withdrew after she filed a single motion. She didn't lose. That was the thing about Diana Monroe. She didn't lose. And she was standing at Alina's table. But how? Why? Her retainer was $500,000. Alina had $0. This didn't make sense. Unless... Marcus's mind raced. Did Alina have family money he didn't know about? Had she somehow gotten a loan? But from who? The answer was simpler and more devastating than he could have imagined. But he wouldn't learn it until later. For now, all he knew was that his easy victory had just become a war. And wars with Diana Monroe only ended one way. One of the law students was frantically typing on his phone, probably messaging his entire study group. "You're not going to believe who just walked into Morrison's courtroom." Derek Foster found his voice, though it came out strangled. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Mrs. Chen has been representing herself all morning. You can't just allow." "I can allow any licensed attorney to enter an appearance at any time, Mr. Foster." Judge Morrison's voice was still professional, but there was something new in it now, a sharpness. "And if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Monroe has been a member of this state's bar for over 20 years. "I was admitted in 1998, Your Honor," Diana confirmed pleasantly, "though I don't practice in this jurisdiction frequently." Her smile carried unspoken words, "because most cases here aren't worth my time. I've been following this case with great interest. Mrs. Chen was reluctant to accept my representation, but I convinced her that some battles require certain expertise." She turned to Alina, and for the first time since entering the courtroom her expression softened. Just slightly, just enough. The predator's smile became something almost human. "Hello, Alina," she said quietly. Alina's eyes filled with tears. "Diana, you didn't have to. You're so busy. You have cases in New York I never expected." "Yes," Diana said, her voice gentle but firm. "I did have to, and we'll talk about why later. For now, trust me." She laid a hand on Alina's shoulder, brief and gentle, then turned back to the court. The softness vanished like it had never existed. Judge Morrison cleared her throat. Very well, Ms. Monroe. You're entering this case in progress. We've already heard testimony from Mr. Chen and his accountant regarding asset disclosure and division. Mr. Foster was about to call his next witness. Do you need time to review? No, Your Honor. I'm quite prepared. Diana returned to her briefcase and removed a stack of documents easily 3 inches thick. In fact, I have some preliminary motions I'd like to raise before we proceed any further. Derek finally found his footing, confidence returning like a drowning man grasping at driftwood. Your Honor, this is absurd. You can't allow opposing counsel to simply waltz in mid-trial and start making motions. I can and I am, Mr. Foster. Judge Morrison's tone could have frozen liquid nitrogen. Ms. Monroe is properly credentialed and has entered a timely appearance. You'll have ample opportunity to respond to whatever motion she raises. Now sit down and let her proceed. Derek sat, he had no choice. Diana inclined her head in a gesture of respect that somehow still managed to convey absolute dominance. Thank you, Your Honor. I'll be brief. First, I move to compel complete financial discovery. The disclosures provided by the respondent are, to put it charitably, incomplete and potentially fraudulent. Derek shot to his feet like he'd been spring-loaded. Your Honor, we've provided exhaustive documentation, tax returns going back 10 years, property deeds, corporate filings, statements from every account. Every single asset has been properly disclosed and documented according to state law. These baseless allegations. Diana's voice cut through his objection like a scalpel through flesh. I have in my possession evidence of no fewer than 9 offshore accounts held by shell corporations controlled by your client. I also have documentation of 6 properties held under nominee trusts that were not disclosed in any filing submitted to this court. Additionally, I have evidence of systematic asset transfers over the past 18 months, transfers totaling approximately $115 million, designed specifically and deliberately to hide marital property from division in these proceedings. The courtroom went absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on carpet. Marcus's hands, which had been resting casually on the defense table, clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went white. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Derek had gone pale again. Diana continued, her voice calm and measured and absolutely certain. I'm prepared to provide this evidence to the court and to opposing counsel immediately, but I wanted to give Mr. Chen one single opportunity, to amend his disclosures voluntarily, to come clean, as it were, to tell the truth before we're forced to expose every lie he's told under oath. She paused for perfect dramatic effect. Because if we proceed as planned, and if his current testimony stands, I will be forced to use a word I very much dislike using in court. Another pause, perfectly timed. Perjury. Derek looked like he might vomit. Your Honor, these are wild, unfounded allegations without any basis in. I have documentation, Mr. Foster. Diana lifted a bound report from her stack, easily 200 pages thick. This is a forensic accounting analysis prepared by Morrison Financial Investigators, one of the most respected forensic accounting firms in the country. It covers the past 7 years of Mr. Chen's financial activity in exhaustive detail. Bank records, wire transfer receipts, corporate filings in 4 foreign jurisdictions, and sworn affidavits from 3 former employees of Chen Holdings regarding systematic fraud, deliberate misreporting, and intentional concealment of assets. She walked forward with measured pace and handed the report to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Morrison with trembling hands. You'll find everything meticulously indexed and cross-referenced, Your Honor, Diana said. Account numbers, dates, transfer amounts, receiving entities. The shell corporations are particularly interesting. Chen International Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands with an operating agreement that makes Mr. Chen the sole beneficial owner. Chen Property Management, LLC, also Cayman Islands. Chen Ventures S.A., registered in Luxembourg. All of them capitalized with funds that should absolutely have been reported as marital assets, all designed for one purpose and one purpose only, to hide wealth from Mrs. Chen in these proceedings. Judge Morrison began paging through the report, and with each page she turned, her expression grew darker. The professional judicial neutrality started cracking around the edges, revealing something underneath that looked very much like anger. Marcus leaned close to Derek, his voice a desperate hiss barely audible. "How does she have this? How is this even possible?" Derek's voice trembled. "I don't know, I have absolutely no idea. I don't understand how she could have." Diana heard them. She had excellent hearing. She turned to face Marcus directly, and when she spoke, her voice carried easily across the silent courtroom. "I have this, Mr. Chen, because I'm very, very good at my job, because I have resources you can't imagine and investigators you'll never identify, because I have contacts in foreign banking jurisdictions who owe me favors, and because when you build an empire on lies, when you construct your success on fraud and deception, you leave trails, footprints, evidence, and people who are very good at what they do, people like me, can follow those trails right back to the source." She turned back to Judge Morrison. "Your Honor, I move for an immediate evidentiary hearing on these matters. I also move to freeze all assets, every account, every property, every investment, every holding, pending proper disclosure and accurate valuation of the marital estate." "Your Honor, this is completely outrageous." Derek was losing his composure now, his voice rising toward panic. "Ms. Monroe is attempting to ambush these proceedings with unsubstantiated documents and wild allegations designed to—" "Are these bank records authentic, Mr. Foster?" Judge Morrison's voice could have shattered glass. Derek stopped mid-sentence. I would need time to verify the authenticity of—" "The account numbers are listed clearly in the report, Mr. Foster. The routing numbers are there. The foreign bank identifiers are included. The wire transfer confirmation codes are documented." Diana's voice was pleasant, almost friendly. "It would take your team approximately 20 minutes to confirm that these accounts exist and that they belong to entities controlled by your client. Shall we take a brief recess while you make some phone calls to the Cayman Islands? Or shall we proceed on the entirely reasonable assumption that I wouldn't bring fabricated evidence to a sitting judge?" Judge Morrison set the report down with a thud that echoed through the courtroom. "Mr. Foster, I'm giving you until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning to review this documentation thoroughly and provide a complete, comprehensive response. In the meantime, I am hereby issuing a temporary restraining order freezing all accounts and assets in Mr. Chen's name or under his control, direct or indirect. This includes all corporate entities, all trusts, all nominee holdings, all domestic and foreign accounts, all property, all investments. Nothing moves. Nothing is transferred. Nothing is sold or encumbered without express written approval from this court. Is that absolutely clear? Your Honor, this will destroy. This is not negotiable, Mr. Foster. If these allegations have even a fraction of the merit that preliminary review suggests they have, this court will absolutely not permit further asset dissipation or concealment while we determine the truth. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp. I expect you and your client to be prepared to respond comprehensively and honestly to Ms. Monroe's evidence." She picked up her gavel. "And Mr. Foster, I strongly suggest you spend tonight reviewing your ethical obligations as an officer of this court, because if you knew about any of these hidden assets and failed to disclose them, we're going to have a very serious conversation about your bar license." She banged the gavel once, sharp and final. "Court is adjourned." The courtroom erupted. Attorneys scrambled for the exit, phones already in their hands. The law students frantically scribbled notes. The journalists typed on their phones, sending messages to editors. Marcus sat frozen at the defense table, both hands gripping the edge like he might fall off the earth if he let go. His carefully constructed world, his perfectly planned victory, had just been detonated. Diana packed her briefcase with methodical precision, unhurried. She spoke quietly to Alina, words no one else could hear. Alina nodded, wiped her eyes, nodded again. Then Diana turned and walked toward the exit, heels clicking against marble, back straight, every inch the conqueror. As she passed the defense table, she paused, just for a moment, just long enough to meet Marcus's eyes. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Chen," she said quietly for his ears alone. "I suggest you use tonight very wisely. Review your options, consider your priorities, think about what matters most to you, because what you saw today, that was professional courtesy, respect for the court's time and procedures. Tomorrow I stop being polite. Tomorrow begins the reckoning. Tomorrow I show this court exactly what you are." She walked out. The doors swung closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than the explosion of her entrance. Marcus didn't sleep that night. His penthouse felt like a cage. He paced, phone pressed to ear, talking to Derek, to offshore accountants, to banking reps who suddenly sounded nervous. "How much does she know?" Marcus demanded. Derek's voice crackled, exhausted. "Marcus, she knows everything. Account numbers I didn't know existed. Shell core we set up through intermediaries. She's traced transfers back 7 years. What do we do?" "Silence. We settle, 50 million, 60, whatever it takes." "No, we fight." "Marcus," Derek rarely interrupted clients, "if we go back tomorrow and she presents this publicly, you're looking at criminal charges, perjury, tax fraud, maybe worse. The DA could get involved, the IRS. You need to understand the situation." Marcus ended the call. He pulled up his phone, Diana Monroe, attorney. Results were extensive, but an older article caught his attention. How a random act of kindness changed one attorney's life forever. The article was about Diana's near-death experience at 29. Car forced off highway during rainstorm, crashed into drainage ditch. Car flooding, leg trapped. She was there 40 minutes, drowning slowly. Until someone found her. A woman driving home from her nursing shift. She climbed down in pouring rain, held Diana's head above water for 40 minutes until emergency services arrived, then stayed at the hospital for 2 days. The article included a photo. Diana in hospital bed, arm in cast, standing next to her, Alina. 17 years ago, before the marriage, before the money. Alina had been making $9 an hour, driving a 15-year-old Honda. And she'd saved Diana Monroe's life. The article quoted Diana. "I asked her why she stayed at the hospital. She said, because you needed someone. That's who Alina is. She sees someone suffering and she stays. I owe her everything." Marcus stared at the screen. He'd married that woman, lived with her 16 years, and never knew this story. She'd never mentioned it, never used it, never leveraged it. Because that wasn't who Alina was. But now the person she'd saved was coming to return the favor. 9 o'clock the next morning. Marcus arrived alone. Derek had withdrawn. His new attorney, Patrick Chen, looked appropriately nervous. "We need to settle immediately," Patrick said. "Minimize criminal exposure. Ms. Monroe has enough to destroy you." They entered. Alina sat straighter today, hands still folded but not shaking. Diana beside her, reviewing notes with confidence. Judge Morrison entered at 9:00 sharp. "Mr. Chen, I see you have new counsel." Patrick stood. "Patrick Chen, Your Honor, my client would like to address the court." "Proceed." Marcus approached the podium, no idea what to say. "Your Honor, I've reviewed the evidence Ms. Monroe presented. It's all true. I deliberately concealed assets. I lied under oath. I structured my finances to hide wealth from my wife. I'm deeply sorry. I'd like to amend my disclosures completely. and offer Mrs. Chen a settlement reflecting the true value of our community property. He said. Diana stood. Your Honor, given that he lied under oath yesterday, the court needs to hear the full scope of his deception before we discuss settlement. Judge Morrison nodded. Proceed. What followed was surgical. First, Robert Kim, forensic accountant. He projected bank statements, millions moving from Chen Holdings to offshore accounts, laundering through shell corporations into Marcus's personal control. Second, Jennifer Park, former VP of Finance. Mr. Chen instructed me to create false expense reports, show lower profit margins than reality. Money that should have been reported as profit was diverted into accounts he controlled personally. When I expressed concern, he threatened to ensure I never worked in finance again. Third, Gerald Park, the accountant who testified about complete disclosure. Diana handed him an email. This is from you to Mr. Chen 8 weeks ago. Read the highlighted portion. Gerald's voice cracked. Per your instructions, I've excluded the Cayman accounts from the disclosure filings. So when you testified yesterday that all assets were disclosed, you were committing perjury. I was following my client's instructions. You were lying under oath, Mr. Park. Diana continued for 3 hours. Property deeds showing nominee trust houses, corporate records proving subsidiaries designed to hide assets, tax returns filed in foreign jurisdictions reporting income never shown domestically. Each piece irrefutable, each document authenticated. Diana called Elena. Elena walked to the stand slowly. How long were you married to Marcus Chen? 16 years. What was your role? Homemaker. Marcus wanted me to focus on our home. He said he needed someone he could rely on. Were you there for him? Yes, every day. When he was stressed, when deals failed, when he couldn't sleep, I was there. When did things change? Elena's voice tightened. 4 years ago, he started saying I was useless, that I contributed nothing. He criticized everything, said I was dead weight. When did you learn about the divorce? 7 months ago. He moved out while I was at the grocery store. His attorney sent papers. When I tried to access our accounts to hire a lawyer, he'd frozen everything. I had nothing. What did you do? Elena looked at Diana, smiled slightly. I remembered a rainy night and a car accident and a woman I helped. Someone who told me if I ever needed anything I should call her, so I did, and Diana answered. Thank you, Elena. Diana's final evidence, an audio recording. Your Honor, I have one last piece of evidence. A recording of a conversation between Mr. Chen and his former attorney Derek Foster from 8 weeks ago. She approached the bench, handed Judge Morrison a transcript. This recording was provided to me by someone present during that conversation, someone who became deeply concerned about the ethical violations being discussed. Patrick half rose. Your Honor, attorney-client privilege does not protect communications made in furtherance of a crime or fraud, Mr. Chen. Judge Morrison's voice was ice. Marcus's mind was racing. Who had been in the room during that conversation? Just him, Derek, and... Oh God! The paralegal, Sarah, Derek's paralegal who'd sat in the corner taking notes. The paralegal Marcus had fired 3 weeks ago when she'd started asking too many questions about the offshore accounts. The paralegal he'd threatened, told her she'd never work in law again if she talked. Turns out, threatening people only works if they're more afraid of you than they are of going to prison themselves. Sarah hadn't just talked, she'd recorded everything, and she'd given it all to Diana Monroe. Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. Diana pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the courtroom. I need the Cayman accounts off the books. If Elena's attorney finds them, if she even gets an attorney, this falls apart. Derek's voice, Marcus hiding assets is fraud. I won't be caught. Alina doesn't know anything. She's been useless for years. She won't even know where to look. Silence. Judge Morrison removed her glasses. Mr. Chen, stand up. Marcus stood, legs unsteady. I've been a judge for 25 years. What you have done, the systematic fraud, the deliberate perjury, the cruelty toward your spouse, is among the worst I have encountered. I am finding the total marital estate, including all hidden assets, is valued at $467 million. Mrs. Chen is entitled to half, $233 million. Additionally, spousal support of $250,000 per month for 12 years or until Mrs. Chen remarries. You will be responsible for all her attorney fees. Furthermore, I'm referring this to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Evidence of perjury and tax fraud is overwhelming. You will remain in this jurisdiction. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. Marcus stood frozen, world collapsing. Diana packed her briefcase methodically. Then she paused beside Marcus's table. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then she spoke, quietly, but in the silent courtroom, everyone heard every word. You want to know how I knew, don't you, Mr. Chen? How I found everything. How I traced every account, every transfer, every lie. Marcus couldn't speak. Alina may have been quiet, but quiet people notice things. They remember. When you spent 16 years treating your wife like she was invisible, like she didn't matter, like she was just furniture in your perfect life, you forgot something very important. She leaned closer. Invisible people see everything. Then Diana straightened and her voice changed, became softer, more human. But you want to know the real reason I took this case. The real reason I flew across the country for a woman who couldn't pay me a single dollar. The courtroom was breathless. 17 years ago, Mr. Chen, I was 29 years old, rising star at a big firm, working late one night, driving home in a rainstorm. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now, something raw. Another car forced me off the highway. I crashed through a guardrail and down into a drainage ditch. The car flipped, started filling with water. My leg was trapped under the dashboard. Someone in the gallery gasped. I was there for 40 minutes, screaming for help that wasn't coming, drowning slowly, the water rising inch by inch, my chest, my neck, my chin. Marcus's face had gone white. Alina was driving home from her shift at a nursing home. $9 an hour, 15-year-old Honda. She saw the broken guardrail. She stopped. Diana's voice tightened. She climbed down into that freezing, dirty water without hesitation. In the pouring rain, she found me, and she held my head above the surface for 40 minutes while we waited for paramedics. 40 minutes with her arms shaking from exhaustion. She refused to let go. The courtroom was dead silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. Then she stayed at the hospital for 2 days, sitting in the waiting room, making sure I was okay. I asked her why she risked her life for a stranger, why she stayed when she could have just left. Diana's smile was sad now, gentle. She said, because you needed someone. She turned to look at Alina, who had tears streaming down her face. That's who your useless wife is, Mr. Chen. That's the woman you called dead weight. The woman you dismissed as ceremonial. The woman you told this court contributed nothing of value. Diana turned back to Marcus. She gave me my life, everything I am, everything I've built, my career, my firm, my success. All of it exists because Alina Chen chose to stop that night, because she chose to climb down into freezing water, because she chose to stay. Her voice hardened again, steel returning. So when she called me 7 months ago, terrified, alone, with $0 because you'd frozen every account, did you really think I wouldn't answer? Did you honestly believe I wouldn't come? Did you think for even 1 second that I would let you destroy her? Marcus opened his mouth. No words came out. You didn't just underestimate your wife, Mr. Chen. You underestimated a woman who saves lives without asking for anything in return. And when you did that, you sealed your fate. Diana picked up her briefcase. Enjoy federal prison. I hear it's very different from your penthouse. She walked out. The gallery erupted. Reporters sprinted for exits. Law students sat stunned. The bailiff was openly crying. And Marcus Chen stood alone, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. 8 weeks later, Marcus was arrested. Tax fraud, perjury, wire fraud, obstruction. His attorneys talked plea deals, 5 to 7 years if he cooperated. Chen Holdings collapsed within 60 days. Empire disintegrated. His name became a warning, a case study in what not to do. And Alina. The apartment wasn't large, 1,500 square feet in a quiet neighborhood, hardwood floors, large windows with morning light, kitchen with granite counters. Alina stood watching movers bring in furniture, not the ornate penthouse pieces. These were hers, chosen by her. Comfortable couch in soft gray, reading chair by the window, bookshelves waiting to be filled. It wasn't fancy, but it was hers. Diana stood beside her, holding coffee mugs. You didn't have to come, Alina said. You have that merger case. The merger can wait. I wanted to see you settled. Silence. I never properly thanked you, Diana said. For that night, the rain, the ditch. You've thanked me plenty. You gave me my life back. No, you already had your life. Marcus tried to steal it. I just helped you reclaim it from a thief. She turned to Alina. What will you do now? I think I'll go back to nursing, become an RN, work in emergency care, something where I can help people who need it. Diana smiled. That sounds exactly right for you. They stood together, watching morning light fill the apartment. Two women who'd saved each other, who'd given each other gifts that couldn't be measured in money, life itself, and the courage to reclaim it. Marcus Chen learned something in that courtroom. Learned it too late to save himself. He learned that invisible people see everything, that quiet people remember, that the person you underestimate today might be the one who destroys you tomorrow. Not through malice, not through revenge, but simply by existing, by mattering, by having worth you were too arrogant to notice. Alina saved Diana's life 17 years ago without expecting anything in return. A simple act of kindness, a choice to stop, to help, to stay. That single act came back when she needed it most. Not as karma, but as the simple truth that good people remember good deeds. That kindness creates connections stronger than steel. Marcus built his empire on lies and ruthlessness. Alina built her life on kindness and presence. In the end, only one of those foundations proved strong enough to survive. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button now. I've got more stories like this, underdogs who rise, bullies who fall, and justice that actually works. Drop a comment. What would you have done in Alina's position? Would you have stayed quiet for 16 years or fought back sooner? Have you ever been underestimated by someone who regretted it? I read every comment. I want to hear your stories.